You actually called yourself the GOAT because you made $62 million for playing 17 games.
Oh man, that's GOAT shit right there.
Allan Houston survived the Allan Houston Rule. Amnesty was a very common practice for general managers over the past 18 years, but the Knicks shooting guard ended up not suffering the consequences of a rule that really came about because of him. Franchises needed a way to get rid of the most toxic contracts, which prevented proper team advancement. From 2005 and until 2022, all teams had a single amnesty that they could use on eligible players. But this is just a consequence of franchise mismanagement. So let's take a look at the origin. Every free agency teams try to accumulate as much talent as possible without giving up any assets. In exchange for free assets, NBA franchises are able to make huge talent acquisitions thanks to this process that unfolds every July. However, these signings don't always end up working out. Allan Houston is just one example of a player whose performance was well below his exorbitant contract, mostly due to his injuries.
Best defenders in the league on him. Houston on the drive. Reverse and the foul.
But the time has come to find similar cases. Welcome to this review of the worst free agency signings in recent NBA history. Small markets like Detroit have a tough time attracting free agents, and when team success doesn't go along with it, the task becomes even more complicated. That's the reason why the Detroit Pistons offered Josh Smith a $54 million contract for 4 seasons way back in 2013. Jay Smoove, who had never been an NBA All-Star, was in that tier of players who had potential to take a big leap at any time.
Denver. Josh fires. Off the heel and back in again.
However, the experiment did not go well at all. Maurice Cheeks made his debut on the Pistons bench with the complicated task of making 3 interior players compatible: Andre Drummond, Greg Monroe, and Josh Smith. They were the 3 best players on the team, and the build was poorly done. Their limited ability to open the court caused an experienced coach like Cheeks to last only 50 games as bench boss, with a record of 21 wins and 29 losses. Josh Smith shot 25% on 3-pointers, with more than 3 attempts per game in his time in Detroit. And just 1 year after his signing, he was cut via the stretch provision. 4 years later, the Lakers made the worst signing in recent franchise history. That's because the summer of 2017 was a strange one. The reason was simple. There weren't many top-tier players available in the free agency market. However, the progressive rise of the salary cap had caused teams to have a large amount of spending power, so teams decided to overpay players to get their services. This was the case of Luol Deng, who signed a 4-year, $72 million contract with the Los Angeles Lakers. During the first season, the veteran small forward only played 1 game. During his time with the Lakers, Deng only suited up for a total of 57 games. His contribution? 7.5 points per game on 37% shooting from the field. Deng's steady performances during his time under Eric Spoelstra with the Miami Heat and previously with the Chicago Bulls were the main reason for this deal.
To Joe King. Joe King to Luol and he scores.
That's why Joe King's out.
Which turned out terrible for the Californian franchise. However, this is a frequent occurrence during this period of exponential economic growth in the league. Just a year before the Los Angeles Lakers acquired the services of Luol Deng, in 2016, the New York Knicks did the same with Joakim Noah. In both cases, players who had been part of the core of the Chicago Bulls' relative success, and in both cases were past the prime of their careers. That year, the former Defensive Player of the Year signed a contract that was exactly the same as his former teammates, $72 million over 4 seasons. Noah played only 53 games with the New York Knicks during the 2 seasons he was part of the franchise, averaging a meager 4.5 points per game on 43% shooting from the field. That's about $4 million for every point averaged.
You sound like a young man's father that's trying to date my daughter and trying to sell me on it.
And the Knicks weren't the only team that handed out a bloated contract that offseason. The beginning of Chandler Parsons' career was an incredible story of overachievement. The player was selected with the 38th pick in the 2011 draft and had carved out a niche for himself in the Houston Rockets starting lineup early in his career. Parson had good defensive skills as well as being a great 3-point shooter, qualities that were highly valued on those Rockets. However, the player had already spent time with the Dallas Mavericks when Memphis offered him a $95 million contract for 4 seasons. It was 2016, and the deal looked good for a Grizzlies squad that were in a position to compete with players like Mike Conley, Marc Gasol, and Zach Randolph. However, the small forward would only go on to play 95 games in his 3 seasons in Memphis, with a dismal average of 7.2 points per game on 39% shooting from the field. The player was eventually traded to the Atlanta Hawks, where he barely played any minutes before retiring at the age of 31. A different case of a bad contract is what happened to Gilbert Arenas. Known for his incredible charisma, Agent Zero's prime was so good that he was part of the All-NBA teams for 3 consecutive seasons. And that All-Star performance he had since winning the Most Improved Player award for the 2002-2003 season allowed him to sign several lucrative contracts over his career. In fact, the point guard signed a contract for $111 million over 6 seasons with the Washington Wizards. Injuries began to affect Gilbert's performance, and just 1 season after signing the contract, he was traded to the Orlando Magic, where he averaged 8 points per game on 34% shooting from the field. After being cut by the franchise, Arenas received paychecks until November 2016, 8 years after his signing, raking in total earnings during his career of over $160 million. But this wouldn't be the only time the Wizards would ink a bad deal with their all-star point guard. It was summer 2017 when John Wall was one of the top point guards in the league.
Time, a minute and a half. Wall throws it up. What a shot! Whoa.
After rumors of his dissatisfaction with the amount of money Bradley Beal was making compared to him, the franchise wanted to reward Wall's good performance during the previous season by giving him a contract of $170 million over 4 seasons. And it was well deserved, as John was coming off a season in which he averaged 23 points and 11 assists per game, leading the Wizards to a record of 49 wins and 33 losses. However, John Wall never again played more than 41 games in any of his NBA seasons since receiving that deal. That was exactly the amount per year that our next player on the list, Ben Simmons, signed for. In the summer of 2019, and after suffering through Kawhi Leonard's infamous Game 7 winner elimination, the Sixers had to re-sign the point forward if they wanted to continue to build around him and Joel Embiid. Despite the fact that the player's growth already appeared to be stagnant, his basketball contribution was still very valuable for the Sixers, so they renewed the Australian for a figure of $170 million over 5 seasons. A decision that, as we all know, did not go too well. Not only did Simmons not fulfill the length of his contract, but during the start of the 2021 season, he did not play a single game despite being cleared by team doctors to return to the court. Ben is still young and can be a valuable player in the league again, but at this point it seems nearly impossible for him to return to being a max contract player again. Teams have a tendency to think that 1 or 2 signings can fix a bad roster construction. However, it has been proven that overpaying players carries a lot of risk and not much upside, except in a few specific cases such as Jalen Brunson with the New York Knicks. In this year's free agency market, players signed for a total of $1 billion during the first 24 hours of the market. Players like Fred VanVleet have signed for exorbitant figures of $129 million for 3 seasons. That's nearly $40 million per year for the undersized point guard who shot only around 40% from the field for his career. Only time will tell if the Rockets have found the piece to become a winning team, or at worst, they'll have to give assets to get out from under his contract. This is also the case for Jeremy Grant, who just signed a contract worth $160 million over 5 seasons. Although the forward is still young, his role on the team may become meaningless if the Portland Trail Blazers trade Damian Lillard and decide to rebuild in the near future. Now that it looks like Dame Dollar wants to leave for the Miami Heat, Jeremy Grant could mean extra wins at the end of the season that could prevent the franchise from moving up in the draft lottery. Signing free agents is like participating in the stock market. You have to find the best assets at the lowest price in order to save valuable cap space for your developing talent. A well-priced contract can return valuable assets in the future, or can be the building blocks to a financially well-managed team. Allan Houston was one of the early examples of team owners trying to get out of bad contracts. Nearly 25 years ago, the NBA owners collectively decided that they should get a free pass in the salary cap game to get out of bad financial decisions. And at the pace in today's NBA spending and with more money in the league each year, how long before team owners agree on a second amnesty?
Worst of all times.
Well, it could be. I'm not arguing that it's not.